All right, guys, it looks like it's a little past 11 Pacific Standard, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know James and Nikhil are now here. Can you guys go ahead and share your screens? We can all see you. Or share your video more like.
Yeah, I think you need to allow the access here. Being a little stubborn.
There we go. Try that now. That should work. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. My name is Joel Ramirez. I'm our director of USMLE Complex and Medical School Tutoring at Medical Coach. That essentially means that I make sure all of our tutors have everything they need in order to help you guys succeed. We have Nikhil and James here. Both are amazing tutors for us, also both St. George's students. They both do step 1, and then I believe that Nikhil also tutors for step 2 CK. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves too.
Definitely. So I'm Nikhil, MS4 at St. George's, as Joel said. Happy to be here to speak to you guys. And again, any questions about step 1, forward-thinking step 2, and then as a current applicant, happy to field those questions as well.
My name is James Fair. I'm an MS3, also went to SGU. Nikhil was actually my tutor at Med School Coach. So like you said, I tutor for step 1. So, obviously any questions that you have, feel free to reach out to either of us.
All right. Thanks for being here, guys. And thanks everyone for attending. The point of this webinar is just to give you guys a useful opportunity to learn a little bit from Nikhil and James. They both are really successful in their exams, and I know that they bring a really unique experience because they also are St. George's students. So we're really looking forward to hearing from them. Here are all 3 of our hosts. We already had a chance to introduce ourselves, so we'll go ahead and just get rolling. And so first of all, we're just going to go ahead and start off a quick overview of what step 1 is. I'm sure most people are pretty familiar with it by now, but what step 1 is and why it's so important. So we'll go ahead and start with a question. I know we have a good amount of people here, and then we're going to go ahead and just ask, what year in medical school are you? I think most people are probably 1st and 2nd year students, but we might have a few others. You go ahead and just let us know. I see a lot of 2nd years. Great. So it looks like there's mostly 2nd years, some other students 1st years, some other students are a little further along their medical school experience. I think it's great. I think thinking about these things from day 1 is going to be really important, especially our topic today. We're going to be talking about memorization tactics. Frankly, it could be really useful for any student for any year. So this is going to be a little bit of an overview. We're going to try to talk minimally and then allow you guys to do a question and answer. So we'll probably talk for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor to answer any questions. And then Nikhil and James will have a chance to answer all your questions about step 1. The topic is about memorization, but if you guys have questions about anything else, we're more than happy to answer them as well. So just really quickly, what is step 1? So step 1 is a very challenging exam. It's the first exam of the 3 exam block, essentially, to get your United States medical license. Very challenging, very long. So step 1 is going to be 7 1-hour blocks for a total of 8 hours of exam. It's about 7 1 hours, and you get about 45 minutes of break with a 15 minutes of orientation. So if you combine those and you skip through the orientation, which is reasonable, then you should have about an hour break. So it makes for a very long day. You also are going to cover about 280 total questions, 40 questions per block. Should be about 90 seconds per question. So you pretty much have to read the STEM, dissect the STEM, and read all the answer choices and choose the right answer choices within 90 seconds. So obviously efficiency becomes really important. All questions are worth the same number of points, and there's no penalty for guessing. And so here's just kind of a distribution of scores. we hope that we can get you up into the 240s and 250s like James and Nikhil, and help you guys kind of get to that bar and allow you guys to pursue whatever kind of specialty you're interested in. So I'll open up another question. How important do you think step 1 is for residency? Is it the #1 thing that people look at? Is it just to get you into the gates? What do you guys think? Okay. So I think people agree that it plays a large role. I see a lot of #1s. Okay. So I'll go ahead and talk from my perspective. So I'm currently a 4th-year medical student as well, kind of applying into the integrated vascular surgery programs, and been on interviewing across the country. So I kind of had a chance to talk with a lot of program directors and then talk with a lot of co-applicants on the cycle. And so the thing is, residency applications are similar to medical school applications in the sense of they kind of look at your big picture, right? So they're going to read your personal statement. They're going to look at your letters. They're going to look at your dean's letters, your letters of recommendation written by all your faculty members. They're going to look at your clinical grades. Did you get honors? Did you perform well? And they're going to look if you have any research contributions. All of these are really important. However, the thing with a step 1 score, it is really easy to interpret. And you can imagine if you're a program director and you're reviewing thousands of applications, it's really easy just to sort by step 1 and just go from there and start from the top and make your way down. So when you're looking at the reality of residency applications, you're working with physicians, the program directors, who are really busy and they have limited time. And so they're looking for ways to make things easier for them. And step 1 is just a way to do that. And so when you're a program director and you kind of log into your website and you look at applicants, this is what you'll see. So you'll see, obviously we blanked out the applicant's name, but you see their medical school, and you can click sort by step 1 score. And so you could just start from the top, step 1 score, and work your way down. And you can imagine that would make your life a lot simpler if you're a really busy program director. You have multiple other responsibilities, and you just want to maybe invite 50 people or 150 people, depending on the program. So you want to make sure that you are not being filtered out unnecessarily. So you are all talented, you are all interested in serving patients, and you guys are all have the potential to be amazing physicians. And you want to make sure that your step 1 score is going to allow you to get your foot in the door and allow people to spend more time reading about your personal statement and kind of getting to know you. And step 1 is really going to do that. It's either going to open a door or it's going to close the door for you. And we want to make sure that you don't close that door on you. So kind of getting into our topic, what are some methods that you guys utilize to memorize facts? So for MCAT, for your classes, what are some things that you guys do to help memorization? So you see some Anki, some Sketchy, some tables, diagrams, flashcards. Mnemonics. Okay. Great. Great. So we'll go ahead and go through a few ways to memorize different topics. I'll talk, and then we'll give Nikhil and James a chance to talk. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about Anki. I know Anki is, Anki came up a few times in our chat. Pretty popular. So the thing with Anki is for those of you who don't know what Anki essentially is a digital flashcard service. It's a free program you download, you can make digital flashcards, and then it's really based upon timed repetition. So you make a list of flashcards and you review them every day, and then it essentially they get put into an algorithm in which you do new cards and then review cards, and once you do a new card, then it goes into the review card pile. And then the algorithm will either show it to you every day, every third day, every 5th day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are a lot of ways to utilize Anki well, and there's a lot of ways to utilize Anki poorly. And so you want to make sure that if you do use Anki, that you're going to use it in the right way. So I like Anki. I thought it was really useful. I think in reality, for step one and for a lot of your preclinical exams, sometimes you just have to memorize facts. You know, memorizing that what gene is on a certain chromosome that gets mutated and leads to something like Marfan, you're going to have to memorize that. We want to, obviously understanding is always the best way possible, but there's some cases in which there's no really understanding and you want to just have to memorize it. And so when you're going through first aid and pathoma and you identify those, it's nice to put them in an Anki card. That way you have them recorded in a certain spot and you are able to return them when you have time. Anki is nice because it's more efficient than handwriting. So instead of writing all your notes and having a huge stack of note cards, you could just have them digitally on Anki. I always recommend that you aim to do 10 to 30 new cards a day and about 30 to 50 review cards a day. And the important thing is consistency is key. If you do not review cards every day, you're going to fall behind, you're going to get stressed, and it becomes less useful. The timed repetition, the algorithm is designed in which you see it when you're supposed to review it. And when you don't review it, they essentially just stack up in the background. And so when you're supposed to see a card in 3 days, if you don't see it in 30 days, then it's obviously less valuable to you. So one of the most important things when signing up to do Anki is being really honest with yourself. Can you sit down every day and do flashcards 2 to 3 hours every day? If the answer to that is yes, Anki might be for you. If you know yourself well enough and you say, I can't do that, then don't spend a lot of time making Anki cards because you're going to spend a lot of time making the cards and you're not going to review them. So then essentially you're going to have wasted all this time. So really be honest with yourself. To do it well, you have to sit down and do it for minimum 1 to 2 hours every day, Monday through Sunday. And if you miss a day, that's okay, but then the next day you're going to have to essentially make up for it. So if that's something you can commit yourself to, Anki could be priceless. Another useful part of Anki is, since it's a digital flashcard bank, there's a search function. And so I found it useful because it was almost like a digital note-keeping method. So, if I'm writing notes, I can't search, just Control F, murmur, and it takes me to my murmurs. Then I'm sitting there flipping through, trying to remember where I took those notes. With Anki, you can just search murmur, and it's going to pull up all the cards that have that word murmur in it. Really useful. The most useful thing of Anki is, since it's digital, you can copy and paste pictures, you can copy and paste audio, you can copy and paste diagrams. So this becomes really valuable when you're thinking about histology and pathology. You really will allow you to make those connections between words and pictures, and you can switch them around. So for one card, the front can be a histology picture. You try to think about what it is, and then when you flip the card, it can be what the finding is. And you could do the reverse. So you could put what the finding is on the front of the card, think about what it's going to look like, and then when you flip the card, then you actually see the picture. You can also do physical exam signs, rashes, things like that, which makes it really, really useful. So how to use Anki, kind of covered this a minute ago. Review your cards early and every day. I initially was like, I'll spend 2 or 3 months making my cards, and I'll spend 2 or 3 months reviewing the cards. When you do that, it's much harder to review cards. Since you're doing spaced repetition, you're spending so much time reviewing old cards that it's harder to see new cards. You can imagine if you're only doing 20 to 30 new cards every day, then that's going to take 10 days just to get through 200 to 300 cards. You're probably going to have around 1,000 or 2. So don't wait until you're finished creating cards to review them. Start reviewing them from day one. And don't make cards on everything. You don't need 20,000 cards. Make cards that are going to be useful for you. And along the exact same line, avoid using those huge, monstrous pre-made decks for a few reasons. They're like 20 or 30,000 cards. It's going to be so hard for you to get through them. And one of the main benefits is that you are identifying things that are challenging for you and then making a note of it. And things that you find hard to memorize, someone else might not, and vice versa. So those 20,000 cards in this pre-made deck, maybe only 2,000 of them are going to be that useful for you. And so you really want to avoid wasting your time and being inefficient. One person asked the question, is it free to download? Anki is free to download and it's free to use. So we'll go ahead and shift over to Nikhil now, who's going to be talking about some memorization heavy topics. going to be talking about sketchy micro, sketchy farm, and he's going to be talking about how to use tables and diagrams to help memorize.
All right, guys. So looking at these subjects here, I know I still do it, but everyone's like, ugh, micro farm, right? These are the subjects I kind of compare to, like, going back to the gym after you've taken a break, right? So, you were in shape at one time, you were good at these subjects, you really want to be good at them again, but it's just hard to get back on the horse, right? And these are the subjects that you really just, for me, when I was studying, is covering them a little bit every day. So you have a consistent schedule of, okay, Monday, I'm going to do an hour of micro. Tuesday, I'm going to do an hour of microgram negatives. Wednesday will be parasites, so you have this rotating schedule, similarly to pharm and biochem. Now, a couple of these can, as Joel said, be covered with the quick memorization, using a flashcard, for example, pharmacology, mechanism of action, et cetera. But others, it's hard to put all of biochemistry on a flashcard because you need more of a picture-based visual diagram with arrows and, PFK1, all those, different enzymes that have a process and an inhibitor and activator. So certain programs can help with these, as well as tables and diagrams. So if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about Sketchy, which actually coincidentally I didn't use too much of. I used a few videos, but I know a lot of my students currently have been using it during MS1 and 2, and I urge them to use it continuously through dedicated time. So my number one rule is, if you haven't either been familiar with the resource or haven't used it during your MS1 and 2, it's very hard to start using it for your dedicated time, because that time might be only 1 month or 5 or 6 weeks. And it already takes 1 or 2 weeks to get acclimated to such a resource. So again, if you've been using Sketchy Micro and Pharm throughout MS1, throughout MS2, chances are it'll be very helpful for you throughout your dedicated time. What's great about it is it's a visual-based aid that uses different colors, storylines, and little legends to basically spur your memory about different things. So, for example, in all of microbiology, all your gram-positives will have a little gram-positive sign, or a golden color for Staph aureus, or a blue ring for oxidase-positive organisms. So it's a good memory tactic that shows repetitive themes throughout every video. So when you're doing a question in UWorld or on your actual exam, you remember, oh yeah, Pseudomonas has that, that blue in it, so it's oxidase positive. So I thought that's very useful for people who are visual learners and, who maybe remembers where it was on a page, but not necessarily what it was. I know I often say that, oh, I remember where it was on the page, but not exactly what it was. And this is for you folks out there. So when you're doing your dedicated time, it might be important to watch 1 or 2 videos a night to keep you current and keep you consistent with these visual aids. And then as for biochemistry and genetics, is more of a flashcard based, I think, what chromosome is this on? What gene is this on? And like I said before, you stare at genetics and you're like, oh God, here we go again. I thought I mastered it once and it was done. But again, it comes back to haunt you, I can fairly say. As far as biochem goes, for me, I think the most beneficial, and I told James this too, and when we were having our tutoring sessions, was, you just got to draw it out by hand. Even if you're not really a handwriting learner, taking a whiteboard, taking a blank piece of paper and drawing out gluconeogenesis or glycolysis or the Krebs cycle, you have that muscle memory, but then you also realize all these enzymes you forgot and the activating factors. It's often hard to stare at first aid. While it is a great book, it's hard to stare at it and memorize glycolysis by reading it passively. Because I know I've fallen asleep on my first day doing that once or twice, and thankfully I've learned from those mistakes. But I think just doing it by hand, using color codes for activating enzymes, green for activating, red for inhibitory, is really crucial to kind of spur your memory when it comes to testing day. And then using UWorld, this webinar isn't as much of a resource as opposed to methods, but UWorld does, in their explanations, have excellent charts and tables. For those of you who like to be very organized, and for example, pharmacology, you'll have a chart that says mechanism of action, inhibitors, side effects, treatments, contraindications, and that you have a nice table right there. And I think this is an effective way to basically put all of your information in one centralized space, so you can refer to it whenever you have a UWorld question, or you get one wrong and you want to right your wrongs there. And you can use these UWorld diagrams as a it doesn't have to be exactly word for word like the diagram, but use it as a mold to create your own diagram. So creating your own is one of the best memorization tactics in itself.
All right, guys. So, that was a lot of good information that Nikhil and Joel was giving. So I'm just going to talk briefly about just some handwritten stuff and about the SmartBook and UWorld notes. So if you can go to the next slide. So one thing I really like about handwriting flashcards as opposed to Anki is the learn by writing. So when you're doing Anki, you're kind of just passively typing. But when you are handwriting something, you're not only going through the material once, but then you're having it later to go through it again. So it's kind of like two passes in once. The only pitfall to that is it takes longer than Anki. So what I usually recommend to my students, if you're going to handwrite stuff, only do it for the really, really important stuff. So like Joe was saying, you don't want like a 20,000 card deck. So for the handwritten cards, you want to even narrow it down even more to the really, really important stuff that you're not going to remember. So a lot of what my students is, you know, when they would do their review cards at night, they would just put the stack of cards on their desk and then they would just go through them. And then the ones that they got wrong, they would just take the ones they got right out of that. And then they would just keep going every night. And then they would just see that deck of cards dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And then they would go and get a new deck of cards and just keep going through that again. So like I said, just the pitfall is just time consuming. You can randomly mix your handwritten card as much as you want. And it's a little bit easier to kind of navigate than it is with Anki. But the only pitfall to handwriting them as opposed to Anki is Anki doesn't do that bringing them back like every week or so to like jog your memory. You're gonna have to do that yourself. But the great thing about handwritten flashcards is that, like Joel was saying, you do get that handwriting bonus of getting that extra exposure to that material. And one thing I always say is that when you're doing this, I always like to listen to music because I just read that there's studies that like listening to music while you write something down even further solidifies the information. So, you know, anything that you can do to jam that information into your head is going to help. So if we can go to the next slide. So this right here, I think is one of the key things to do during your step one dedicated. So this is what I call the smart book. And Nikhil actually gave me this idea and you know, it's just great. I always tell all my students to do this. So if you see at the bottom of this Excel sheet, you see how I have it divided by organ system. So basically, anytime I went through a UWorld question, a USMLE RX question, or I was reading something in first aid that I just didn't remember, I would just put it under fun fact in that organ system. And then once or twice a week, I would go through every single system and then just read these. And then I would highlight, color code, and do what I needed to do. And this strategy for me worked amazing. I probably saw 30 questions on my step just from reading my smart book like 2 days before. So doing something like this, anything that you just can't remember or you think you're just having a hard time memorizing, this is something that you're going to want to do. And you can even start making it now during your year one or year two and just keep adding to it. And yeah, other than that, that's it for me.
Sorry, I muted myself. Great, thanks James, and thanks Nikhil. I appreciate it. The next thing we'll briefly talk about is kind of how does one-on-one potentially tutoring fit in for you? And then we'll go ahead and just do a question and answer, kind of open up the floor to James and Nikhil. And so one of the great aspects of our tutoring program is we can help with every aspect of the exam. So literally every aspect of the exam, our tutors are prepared to work with you for. Usually that starts with, what kind of learner are you? What resources have you used? What resources should you use? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? Everyone's different and everyone should approach the exam slightly differently. And our tutors not only are great teachers, but they know the exam well and they know resources well. And so they're going to help you identify the right resources for you, and they're going to help create a study schedule for you. So that's going to look different for someone who learns one way versus another way, and for someone who has 1 month to prepare versus 3 months to prepare. And then from there on, your tutors are going to help with whatever you need. And so this is going to be different for each person. For some people, it's, I have a hard time with questions. For others, it's, I need help with content review. For others, it's kind of like, I need help, I have a hard time scheduling and selecting resources. And all of our tutors, including Nikhil and James, are really experienced with that and can help you at each step of the way and guide you on each step of the way. And so people often ask me, well, what can you help me with? And the answer really is pretty much everything. All our tutors are pretty much everything related to step one. Our tutors can help you do. Some kind of key pillars of what we believe is important. So everything we do is personalized. There is no rubric for students. There is no certain pathway that each tutor has to follow. And so everything is going to be personalized to you, scheduling, content, sessions, etc. We have amazing tutors like James and Nikhil. So not only have our tutors scored really high, but all of our tutors actually care about teaching and have a lot of experience teaching. Getting a high score is absolutely not a ticket into becoming a tutor for us. It is a nice way to potentially get us to look at your application, but we really want to bring people who are passionate about having students succeed, and that is core to our values. We can help you learn things faster and retain things. For example, like the kind of tidbit we had on cards, it's things like that which we can help improve your efficiency. Step 1 is a crazy exam. You're never going to learn everything for step 1, but what you can do is get as many points as you can into your bucket so you can get the highest score that you can. And so we can help you identify and improve weaknesses and help build your confidence. And the idea is that all of these collectively is going to help you score much higher. Way it works is if you were interested, you sign on with us, you get paired as a tutor. This would be based upon availability, strengths, weaknesses, the best that we can do as far as personality. We try to link you with someone who makes sense. And then our tutor is going to reach out to you. They're going to schedule for a session. They're going to get to know you. They're going to help you identify resources, select the right resources, create a study plan, and then they're going to figure out how you can best utilize them and their knowledge. And the idea is that that's going to really help you succeed. Few things that we have here. We really stand behind all of our tutoring. What that means is if you purchase a package and you have unused hours, we will refund those unused hours for you. So if you get a 25-hour package and you use 20, those 5 hours that you haven't used, we can refund to you. We also have a score increase guarantee for our 25 and 40-hour packages. If you do not see a 10 or a greater point increase from your NVME to your exam, then we'll give you 10 free hours to kind of get you there. You can switch tutors at any time. So this rarely happens because our tutors are amazing and they get along well with our students, but for some reason, if availability doesn't line up or you think it's a different personality, you can always let us know. We can switch you to a different tutor. If you have any more questions from us, you can find us on our website. Find that you can send us an email here if you have specific questions about any packages or guarantees, tutoring, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also available by phone and you can schedule a phone consult with me if you'd like. So we'll go ahead and open it back up to some question and answers. So I will go ahead and the chat is going to be wide open. If you ask questions, we'll go ahead and one of us will take the question, champion it, and get you your answer. So the first question is, I'll go ahead and take it. Can you give an example of a tutoring session? How does it work? What do you do exactly? So I think this is going to be variable depending on what the student needs. So I'll give an example. Right now, people are just beginning to start getting ready for step 1. Everyone's taking it April, May, and June. So we're so far ahead of the exam. What is important now is content review. And so oftentimes people will come to us and say, you know, I like cardiology, I just didn't really understand it. I thought it was really challenging. I thought all the medications, the cardiac cycle was really challenging. And so in that case, what we would probably do we would do a comprehensive review of cardiology. And so what that would look like is us identifying the most important parts of cardiology: cardiac cycle, cardiac murmurs, histology, pathology, diagnosis, and disease. And we essentially start from square one and walk you through all the most important topics as efficiently as we can and as interactive as we can. So one of the benefits of this is not another lecture for you guys. You guys have lectures. There are boards and beyond. There is a lot of lectures that you can, and videos you can find online. This is going to be interactive. You ask questions, we answer them. We ask you questions, you answer them. We try to engage you, and we can cover content, questions, anything that really you're interested in. The next question is going to be, what is the cutoff point / how long is too long to be studying for step 1? I heard of a plateau. Nikhil, would you be interested in taking that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very common question, actually. You know, some people directly correlate the length of time studying to a better score. And I think in some aspects that's correct, but in many aspects, you know, there is a burnout period that everyone hears of because of the intensity of knowledge and quantity of knowledge. You know, and I spoke to James also when we were tutoring, you know, a year ago, is that, you know, we had many test dates lined up that we could, you know, tweak his schedule for depending on how his week to week went. And that's the, the flexibility of tutoring, is that we can tweak it week by week, depending on. But, to me, I think it's, how many hours do you see yourself studying daily and for how many days a week? Because going 12 hours for 7 days a week is a lot, frankly. And, you're going to feel that burnout in 2 weeks as opposed to someone who studies 6 to 8 hours a day for 6 days a week. And those people might be able to fuel themselves, for 4 to 5 weeks. For me, I found that anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks is a prime period. Typically 4 to 6 is great to cover all the organ systems once, and then have about a week and a half to do, mixed blocks and extra review for all those organ systems that maybe you weren't best at. So I'd say, from our experience and from my experience, about 4 to 6 weeks is a prime dedicated time. And if James or anyone else would like to put some input, that's great too.
I'll just to jump off that. I'm sorry, Joel. I just wanted to say, basically, when Nikhil and I were working together, I was so set on having as much time as possible to study for this test. And I think I had about 7 weeks blocked off to study. And by 5.5 weeks, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't study anymore. And I ended up moving my test up a week. So like I said, it depends on your starting point, and it depends on, how much you see yourself working. But in my opinion, 6 to 7 weeks is probably that Goldilocks zone. Anything more than that, you'll start to burn out.
Great. I'll ask you one follow-up question too, James. The question is, I'm a new student. What year or semester is the best time to start med school coach?
So by new student, I'm assuming he's a year one. It's technically never too early to start med school tutoring. Like if you find yourself struggling in your medical school studies, we can always help you with that. But our tutoring, I guess, is best geared towards your dedicated step studying. So I would recommend probably towards the end of your year two. But like I said, if you're struggling in your year one and you really needed some guidance and some extra help, it's never too early.
I think we, as tutors also, we are available to tutoring, and I still do this currently, is for med school subjects too, so some people only want tutoring in pharmacology or pathology, and that's a viable, request as well, because some people, neuroscience goes really well, but then biochemistry just doesn't stick with them, and it's very person dependent. So, and if this is something you could speak to us about, off the line and send an email about, we're gladly to help you out.
Yeah, I think this is a common question. And what I always say is, it can never be too soon, but it definitely could be too late. So people sometimes come to us 1 or 2 weeks before their exam saying, I'm not where I need to be. I need to get there. And although we're more than happy to help at 1 to 2 weeks, it's very challenging to see a significant increase in 1 to 2 weeks. If you're 3 to 4 months ahead of time, you can't go wrong. If your studying is going better than you expect, then you could always get your remaining hours refunded. And then starting earlier is going to help prepare you for this content and question prep. So that's kind of our take. Next question is, my NVME shows that my patho is on a weaker side. I tried revising and doing more questions, but that has not helped improving my score much. What's your advice for me? So Nikhil, do you have any kind of path advising or resources or strategies for studying path?
Definitely. And pathology is at the heart of this exam, I would say. They always say the 3 Ps is, physiology, pharmacology, and then pathology are the the brunt of this exam. And I think it's a difficult balance to strike between knowing the histology and the pictures and then knowing the underlying, disorders that's going on. Because pathology is essentially the study of abnormal processes, right? What's going wrong in the body. So I think, Pathoma is a phenomenal resource, not only because it has those pictures and it has Dr. Sitar speaking about the pictures and the inherent pathophysiology behind these. So if you haven't heard of or checked out Pathoma, it's a great resource that kind of integrates, passively. You can watch it while you're eating dinner or lunch, but then also take notes on it separately. And then, like you said, I don't know which specific questions you're aiming to do. I think UWorld does a great job, but I think there's more to UWorld than just doing questions. I think you have to really understand, what the right answer is and how, why their answer is better than what you chose at that moment. And that just goes on, diving deeper into these answers, having first aid open, and whatever question you got wrong, kind of referring to first aid right away and seeing where you went wrong, looking at the picture they have in the book, and even as something as simple as going on Google and typing in ovarian carcinoma and seeing what Google has to offer. Because when it comes to test day, they won't give you the picture that's nice and breezy in first aid. They're going to find some other picture of a signet ring cell or something else. And, Google is the best resource out there for that. You just scroll a couple pages and see what they have on, any of these disorders, Samoma bodies, or all these random histologies. So again, it's a multifaceted process, and there are a lot of resources out there. So you really just got to pick the ones that work for you and then keep going back to them over and over again. Sorry, Joel. I think there's another Q&A box here that someone was asking questions into, not just the chat. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, two of them.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yep. So just really quickly tying that back to earlier, just like Nikhil said, Google those pictures, take those pictures, copy and paste them into your Anki cards, right? So when you're saying signet cell or something like that, put all those different weird pictures in Google that all look slightly different, not really pretty from first aid, and put them into Anki. Really quick question we can ask, do we do prep for Step 2 CS? We do prep for 2 CS, so we can do mock kind of patient interactions. We can talk through the note writing, things like that. What is the best way to study for FMG? I'm assuming FMG is a foreign medical grad. I don't know, James, Nikhil, if either of you want to pick that up.
To study, like as an FMG, it's pretty much the same as it would be for a regular American medical student. It's the same material, it's the same stuff we're being taught, it's the same test. So I guess my only thing is, as a foreign medical grad, you just have to try to score higher. So I guess study harder is probably my best advice. But in reality, it's really the same information. It's the same test. And, it's the same stuff we're learning. So there really isn't any difference.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's like Joel said at the beginning, it's a standardized score. It's one score that can, quote unquote, even the playing field, whatever that really means. But I think it's a great way to basically test how well, you went to this school, I went to this school, you were in the US, I was in the Caribbean or Canada, but we're all learning pathology, pharmacology, antiarrhythmics, and how well does that all come together for you, for me, for him, for her. And, so it depends on the person, who's studying, but as an FMG or American grad, the whole picture is about the same, I'd say.
Yeah, it's a great way to show that you know the material just like anyone else. Foreign medical grad, US medical grad, the same test, great opportunity. How do you feel about the Becker course that our school offers, or at least the textbooks themselves?
So I think this might be, is this AUC or AUA student who, I know they offer, one of the schools offers a Becker course. Just correct me if I'm wrong. Becker is similar like AUA and Ross. All right, perfect. So, sorry, I'll take this one if you don't mind. So Becker is very similar to the Kaplan course where, it's a didactic, so it's pretty much, days of lecture, and it's a lot of course content. And I think it's, a good way to review content if you're, really weak on a lot of subjects and you just need to review it again, especially, anatomy, biochem, genetics that you haven't seen for almost a year and a half now. So, you can't really go wrong for these subjects, but I think for these courses, but I think the toughest part about them is, it's just like another lecture in school. It's hard to ask questions. It's hard to get, specifically what you want out of it, which is why, this online forum is a little bit more forgiving, where you don't have to be ashamed to ask a question, or we can spend a whole hour talking about murmurs as opposed to a whole hour talking about all of cardiology in a Becker session, if that kind of makes sense. And textbooks are textbooks. I try to avoid telling students to use textbooks during their dedicated time, because you only have 5 to 7 weeks to study, and textbooks can get pretty boring, I admit. So I'd be very wary about using those during your dedicated time. But the course as a whole is very comprehensive.
I think, to bounce off Nikhil as well, is one of the benefits of one-on-one is you might not need help with all of cardiology. Maybe it's just murmurs. And so when you're doing a course for a group of people, small or large, and they're covering all of cardiology, a lot of that could be wasted time and effort on your part. And so that time and effort could be spent doing other things. James, I'll go ahead and give you this next one. It's kind of a two-part question. One is going to be, when do you start tutoring? When do you start prepping for USMLE 1? And then how do you annotate your first aid book?
So both great questions. You start prepping for USMLE 1, the first day of medical school. The very first day of medical school is you're basically studying for step 1. Everything you learn is basically your first 2 years of medical school is leading up to that test. Obviously not to, make it pressure, but it really is. That's what the first 2 years of medical school is, to prepare you for that test. So the best way in your first 2 years to study for that test is to learn what your school is teaching you and learn it the best you can. But in terms of dedicated study time, where you sit down and you take 6 to 7 weeks of, you just basically take away everything, all your social life and everything, and just sit and do 10-hour days, that would probably be, 4 or 5 days after your final exam of year 2. And then you would give yourself 6 to 7 weeks to study for it. But like I said, that's it. A lot of schools are different in terms of scheduling and like when their second year ends. So that would be kind of like a thing that we would talk about, once you signed up for tutoring. But like I said, studying for step 1 literally starts day 1 in med school. And in terms of annotating first aid, there's a lot of ways that you can do it. I don't recommend like filling every single little detail and then just like crowding up all the stuff. I like to add things from first aid. Like, let's say I'm watching the video from Boards and Beyond. He said something that's not in first aid, but something I, didn't really know or didn't remember. I'd put that in there. I would say, definitely don't write like paragraphs. I just like, highlighting the main stuff that you don't remember, and then just writing the really good tidbits that, things that you wouldn't really find yourself remembering. Personally, for me, I really don't like when people just fill up their entire first aid. It just makes it too crowded, and it just makes it really hard to go back and review.
Right, and one of the benefits of Anki, search function, annotated first aid, you're flipping around first aid and you're sitting there reading through all your margins and trying to find out where you made these notes. Did you make these notes? Did you write them somewhere else? So annotate. I would not put all your notes in first aid. Hard to find, inefficient. Really quick question that I can answer: is all the tutoring online? Yes, all of our tutoring is done online. We do it via Zoom. We give all of our tutors a stylus and pads so they can draw on PowerPoint, circle things, underline things, highlight things like that. Very interactive. It works very well. I'll give Nikhil this next question. What would you recommend current Term 5 SGU students do to study for STEP in these few months before actually starting dedicated? With a new course, we finish all the new material within the next 6 weeks. You're muted.
Great question. Great question. So yeah, I've been hearing some changes about this Term 5, and I apologize for the students who are not at SGU currently who are listening to this. But again, Term 5 is all about test review because you get the pharmacology and pathophysiology. So my advice would be to start looking at some UWorld questions, kind of seeing how UWorld words their questions and how you should be starting to think when you approach UWorld questions. Because, in my opinion and many other tutors and test takers, is that UWorld is almost the closest thing to the exam that you're going to get. The same style of questions, the screen looks the same. So you're pretty much just doing, UWorld, and you come to the test and it's a full day of UWorld essentially when you come inside. So, start looking at some UWorld, start reviewing those organ systems or those, those bland subjects that you took in Term 1, for example, your genetics, your anatomy, your neuroscience, that you really haven't put to use in about a year, because the whole idea is, you don't use it, you lose it. So if you kind of look at, a little bit of anatomy every day or a little bit of biochem every day, and then try a couple of UWorld questions to solidify that knowledge, you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 deal where you study it and then you do a question on it, and it's a full circle review there. I think that was very effective. Even though we had an old schedule, I think it was effective moving forward into dedicated time at the end of Term 5.
Great. I'll go ahead and take this next question. What is a good number of tutoring sessions if one is available to take it during dedicated 7 weeks? Tutoring for 7 weeks right before your exam, probably would recommend 1 to 2 hour sessions, 1 to 2 times a week. That way you'd be meeting with a tutor 2 to 4 hours a week for 7 weeks immediately prior to your exam. How should we plan out a study schedule? That is a very long and detailed answer. What I can say is that we have previously done a webinar about talking about scheduling. James was also featured on that one as well. It is on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, Google Med School Coach, you can watch it. It also is about an hour. So about 30 minutes, we talk about how to make a study schedule, and then we also do a question and answer. So that will probably be the best way to find that, and you could get those detailed answers. One question, James and Nikhil, did either of you use USMLE RX?
I did.
James, great. I'll give this one to you. Regarding USMLE RX, do you think it's better to watch the videos and actively listen or take notes throughout? I find it hard to balance.
So for USMLE RX, I wasn't a fan of the videos. I was definitely a fan of their question bank. So I can't speak on the videos, unfortunately, because I didn't watch them. But in terms of the question bank, I think RX question bank is really good for hammering down the really specific details. Typically, when I did UWorld in my final term at SGU, I did the UWorld completely random. Like everything was always random, but I would always do USMLE RX like at a specific subject, like that we were learning in the pathophysiology. Unfortunately, I never watched the video, so I apologize. I can't speak on that. But for the questions, they're definitely good at hammering in the small details.
Great. And I'll take the next question. Is Zonky/Brosencephalon download for Anki recommended for step prep/first aid? I would be very, very wary of using those. They're both huge. I think one of them is like 15, 20,000 cards. The two problems with those: one, they're huge decks, and it's going to take a really long time for you to get through them, and it's going to be near impossible for you to keep up with the review. Two, those were made by someone else based upon someone else's knowledge base, based upon someone else's challenges, right? So when you are using Anki and you're using all these kind of things that we talked about how to memorize, they should be really focused on what you find difficult memorizing. So that one time when you read something and you're like, I remember that, I'll for sure remember that. And you do a question, you see a question and you're like, I forgot that. It's those things that you want to make sure that you're highlighting. And those are different from every single person. So taking someone else's deck, although might seem more efficient, it's actually, you're going to be spending a lot more time focusing on things that might not necessarily be super helpful for you.
And to add on that, I'm sorry, Joel, just real quick. When I used Brosencephalon in my first year, I saw lots of mistakes. So just to be wary on that as well.
Great. Someone had asked, next question is, do you recommend Anki by USMLE? Dr. Alec? I'm not familiar with either of those. If they're pre-made decks, I probably would be wary. Anyone else have any additional questions about memorization? We can also open up the questions to talk a little bit more about step one. Any questions on tutoring? We are here and available for about 10 more minutes if you have any questions.
I see one here about how close is the NVME to the real exam? That's a question we get a lot, and it's like, oh, I got this score on the NVME. Do you think I'll get it on the real exam, or do you think I'll do better? The NVMEs I like as a marker of how you're doing, but it's not an end-all be-all. I think it's what you learn from that score and how you improve from it. So if you really take that score report and say, I was really lacking in biochem this time, but I did a lot better in cardiology. As tutors, we like you to share your report with us. And what I look for is, okay, if I had you do cardio, renal, and respiratory last week, I want to see that those three sections increase this week from the NVME. But I'm not too worried about neuro, which we haven't covered yet, even though it's maybe towards the bottom of the score sheet. So, it's very about how you interpret the scores and how you learn from them moving forward. And, as far as question style goes, I'd say UWorld, overall UWorld is more like the exam, but NVMEs are good for hitting, high yield, big concepts with very high yield pictures as well, I've found. So it's very, very dependent.
James, can you take, how do you prep for BSCE1 for SGU?
Yeah, so again, I apologize for any of the roster AUA or any other students not from SGU, but I'm assuming that those schools also have some kind of comprehensive exam at the end of their first year. But specifically for the BSCE1, my recommendation is, first of all, definitely don't slack and don't forget what you're learning at that moment, because more likely or not, they're going to put the information. So you'll probably be learning neuro up until the BSCE1. And my advice is definitely make sure you know neuro, because there was a lot of neuro on the BSCE1. Two, just I would definitely get with like a study group and then just start going over the basic concepts, like go back through genetics, talk it out, go back through biochemistry, draw out some pathways, just go through first aid, because it's kind of like a mini step. You can't really know everything that they're going to test you. So the best thing to do is just to cover your grounds, cover your basics, and then just build on the specific details from there. Joe, I see another question that says, does first aid change every year? It does change, but for the most part, they kind of just move around information. There's not much added information. They just kind of take information and put them in different sections. In terms of the difference between 18 and 19 versions, there really wasn't that big of a difference. I say you're okay as long as you're within 2 to 3 years current. But they do change it every year, but the information that changes isn't really that different.
If you have last year's, you don't need to buy a new one this year. And so, next year, you don't need to buy a new one as well. So we get that question often. The changes are usually minimal. Anyone else have any last minute questions? All right, guys. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. If you have any more questions, or if we finish and you realize that you weren't able to ask the questions that you wanted to, you can find us online. You can just go ahead and Google Med School Coach. You can talk to our enrollment team. You can also schedule a one-on-one consult with me if you want to talk a little bit more in detail. So thank you all for your time. We hope this was really useful for you. Good luck for the rest of preclinical. Good luck on step 1, and I hope that you utilize some of these memorization tactics, and hopefully those gets you some free points here and there. All right, take care, guys. Bye.